Hello and welcome to my YouTube channel. My name is Victor A. Horner and I am Solution Architect for several Microsoft technologies. Please like this video if you liked it and subscribe my channel to stay up to date. Thank you very much and enjoy this video. You are operating an Active Directory forest with several thousand users. Your organization decided to integrate additional branch office in a very foreign country. You need to provide a solution so that branch office operators team can manage their resources by their own. You need to create a resources forest only for mailbox, shared mailbox, rooms, and computer management. You are planning to deploy Microsoft Exchange Server in the foreign data center to be compliant to local data protection laws. All branch offices should be able to use Microsoft M365 cloud services to avoid additional operation costs. You need to deploy a multi-forest Azure AD sync infrastructure and configured Exchange hybrid with modern authentication to be compliant to modern cybersecurity standards. In this video, I will demonstrate deployment of user and resource forest, configuration of forest trust, deployment of Microsoft Exchange 2019, configuration of M365 tenant, configuration of ADFS, configuration of Azure AD Sync, creation of users and resources, migration of users and resources. On the left side, you can see installation of user forest, and on the right side, resources forest. Domain controller for user forest is called DC1 and domain name is user.onpremto.cloud. Domain controller for resources forest is called DC1 and domain name is resources.onpremto.cloud. I will not create any custom network configuration for this demo, so all servers will have the same IP4 subnet. Both domain controllers will have the same features installed, Active Directory services and DNS. I am not going to change any network configuration because all servers are part of Azure Resource Group and will receive public and internal IP address automatically. So if you are installing domain controller in an enterprise environment, make sure that you are using a fixed IP address. If you have a firewall between your forests, make sure that you have configured port 389 for LDAP and port 53 for DNS between your domain controllers in both directions. For additional information, you can find a lot of articles on the internet, how to deploy a forest trust between different data centers. Domain controllers installation requires a reboot. After the reboot, we will go ahead with forest trust configuration. Forest trust is a mandatory requirement for operating of Exchange Resource Forest. For this configuration, you need to have domain admin service account in both forests. But first, we need to create a conditional forwarder in each forest so that your domain members can resolve objects in another forest and communicate with each other. Open Server Manager console and select DNS Management console. Extend your DNS Hive and go to Conditional Forwarders. Right-click on Conditional Forwards and select New Conditional Forwarder. Now enter the name of your domain which you are going to trust. In our user forest, I am going to configure resources forest and IP address of DC2. In our resources forest, I am going to configure user forest and IP address of DC1. After configuration of conditional forwarders, our DNS resolution is working across both forests, and we are going to create a two-way forest trust in each of our forests. Open Server Manager console and open Active Directory domains and Trust Management console. Right-click on your forest name and open Properties. Navigate the Trust tab in the top of the windows. Select New Trust to start the New Trust wizard. Enter the full name of the forest you want to trust. In the user forest, we are going to configure resources onpremto.cloud. In the resources forest, we are going to configure user.onpremto.cloud. Select Forest Trust in the Trust Type configuration. We are going to create a two-way trust. Either Exchange Resource Forest configuration will not work. We are going to create a domain-only side because we have only one domain. I want to create a forest-wide authentication so that every allowed user can log into another forest. You can set up permissions for every user from foreign forest by using security groups. Create a secure trust password and archive it because it will be checked periodically for security purpose. click Next until you will reach to Outgoing Trust Confirmation. Select Yes and confirm the outgoing trust. You can confirm the incoming trust or not. This is only for validation purpose. If you don't validate the trust here, it will work without validation. After completing the wizard, click on Finish. We have successfully created conditional forwarders and a two-way trust between our user and resources forest. Now we can go ahead with Exchange installation. Before we will start with Exchange installation, we can start downloading of Exchange installation binaries. Simply search on the internet for Exchange CU13 and download the installation ISO. Every CU has a full installation repository, so you don't need to download Exchange installation binaries and update it to the current version. Here is our fresh installed Windows Server 2019, and this will be our Exchange server. Before I can domain join to Resource Forest, I need to change DNS server to DC2 so that Resource Forest domain can be resolved. After DNS configuration has been changed, check for proper DNS connectivity and start domain join process. I am using PowerShell for domain join because it's easier for me and takes less time. Domain join require a reboot, so we can start with Exchange installation after this reboot. After the reboot, we are starting with installation of all prerequisites for Exchange Server installation. First, we are starting with installation of required Windows features. You can find the full list of all requirements and steps in the GitHub repository for this video. You can find the link in the description. Feature installation does not require a reboot, so we can continue the installation of required packages. Software installation requirements are depending on Exchange version and Windows Server version, so in your case they may be different. Check exact documentation if you have any installation issues. Search for Exchange ISO, which we have already downloaded. Mount the ISO file by simply double-clicking on it. Exchange is a directory service, so we need to prepare our domain and schema first. Run setup command with prepare AD property to prepare your Active Directory for Exchange service installation. Before running preparation command, you need to define Exchange organization name and if you are going to use split permissions model. Split permissions allows you to separate AD permissions from Exchange permissions so that AD operators have no permissions to modify Exchange configuration and Exchange operators doesn't have to administrate Active Directory. After AD preparation is finished successful, we are preparing your domain. Exchange Installation Wizard is creating all required folders and accounts which are required by Exchange service. So after this step, you will have all Exchange groups and service users configured in your domain. To start domain preparation, simply run setup command with prepare domain property as you can see in this video. As last preparation step, we need to extend our schema. This step will provide all required MS Exchange attributes, your Active Directory objects. After completion of this step, all MS Exchange attributes will persist on all your AD objects. You can also edit all Exchange schema attributes by using ADSI editor or any kind of IAM tool, like Microsoft Identity Manager. All three preparation steps may take 60 to 180 minutes, so if you are experiencing a very slow processing of each step, it is a normal behavior, and I have speed up the video tremendously. We have finalized all Exchange installation preparation steps and can start to run Exchange Installation Wizard. You can simply run setup command from Exchange installation binaries directory or simply double-click on setup.x file. Exchange Installation Wizard is copying all installation files from your ISO location to your hard disk. Make sure that you have enough disk space on C drive available. Either installation will stop. We are going to install recommended components and will not change any configuration. If you need to install Microsoft Exchange, I recommend you change installation location of Exchange Server from system drive to some other local drives. Microsoft does not recommend to install Exchange Server on a virtual server, so please use Exchange Server 2019 sizing calculator for productive deployment. Exchange Installation Wizard provides you a possibility to split all Exchange Server roles to different servers. You can install standalone Exchange Management Console on any domain-joined computer. We are going to install Mailbox role because we want to provision mailboxes for users. Exchange Installation Wizard will validate all prerequisites and will inform you if any steps or components are missing. You can simply complete missing steps and continue with installation. Installation of all Exchange components can take a very huge amount of time. In some cases, I saw this wizard running for more than 4 hours. If you are experiencing a slow installation performance, you can be sure that your resource sizing is wrong. On a modern environment, Exchange installation should take around 60 minutes. So, if you need more longer than 60 minutes, I strongly recommend to check your environment regarding Exchange Server 2019 sizing calculator. After your installation wizard is finished and Exchange installation was successful, no reboot is required. So we are going to check our Exchange environment and log into Exchange Management Console, called ECP. Open web browser on your Exchange server and enter following URL, https:/your server name ECP. This URL will redirect you to Exchange Web Management Console. Ignore any kind of certificate errors and just continue with login. I'm going to use my Resource Forest credentials to log into my Exchange server. Users from User Forest are not able to log into ECP because it requires additional Exchange role configuration. After the installation of Exchange Server, you have only one mailbox database, which is located in your Exchange installation directory. If you want to provision your mailboxes in a different location, simply create a new database and place it to another location. The user which you used for installation will become automatically Enterprise Administrator and get the very first mailbox in your environment. I'm not going to change any transport configuration because it is not required for this demo. We are going to start with user and mailbox provisioning. Now we have a user forest and resource forest with an Exchange organization. We can start with user provisioning. I'm going to create a couple of user accounts in our user forest. I am using a simple script for this, which you can find in my GitHub repository. This script is creating 200 users and setting up a password, which you can define at the beginning. During the creation process, I figured out that naming convention used in this script is too long, and I could create only 100 users instead of 200. For this demo, we can also continue with 100 users. During the creating of my user accounts, the script is moving all created objects in a separate OU called user accounts so that we can better manage our users. If you don't see users after the creating, just refresh the view in Active Directory users and computers. Now we can see that all users have been created properly and we can continue with provisioning mailboxes. All users are going to receive a mail domain on premto.cloud, which I have created especially for this video. I will demonstrate how to create linked mailbox in ECP, and then I will provide you a script solution for that purpose. Go to your Exchange Admin Center and select Recipients. Click on plus and select Linked Mailbox. Select your user forest as source user forest and click on Next. Select a linked master account of a user which should receive a new mailbox. We will start with user called userforest_demouser0. After you have picked the right user in your user forest, you are going to configure the new linked object in the resource forest as well. So you can define a new naming convention for your resource forest or just simply copy this information from user forest. All users will receive a default mail domain of your resource forest and not of your user forest. In our resource forest, I have also created an OU called user accounts in which we are going to provision all linked mailboxes. Our first linked mailbox is now created. We are going to test if everything is working as desired. I am going to configure full access for a shared mailbox. All shared and resources mailboxes are persisting only in our resource forest. This test will provide us an overview if our previous steps worked well or not. Go to your Exchange Admin Center and select Recipients. Select Shared and Open Properties of desired shared mailbox. Switch to Mailbox Delegation. Here you can find different permissions which you can assign for each mailbox. We are going to configure full access permissions for our first linked mailbox user. Under Full Access, select a user mailbox which should have access to shared mailbox and confirm with Save. Now we are going to test if we have a proper access. Go to Exchange Webmail and log in with your user account by using right user credentials. After successful login, navigate to your initials in the right upper corner and select Open Another Mailbox. Enter the name of shared mailbox and click on Search Directory. Open now the shared mailbox. If you have no permissions to access, you will receive an error. Access permissions are working fine, so we are going to test if Mailflow is working and we can see the content of our shared mailbox. Now I'm going to create some more linked mailboxes for all my users. I wrote a small script which you can find in my GitHub repository. This script is creating a new AD user account with a linked master account from users forest and enabling mailbox for this user. All users are going to be located in specific OU like we did it in the users forest. After successful provisioning of our users, we are going to create a new M365 tenant and synchronize all users into the Azure Active Directory. Microsoft is providing trial licenses for almost every Microsoft product for 30 days. After the trial period, your payment method will be charged exactly for that number of licenses which you are using. I'm starting with a trial version of a Business Premium license, which includes Exchange Online, Azure Active Directory, mobile device management, and offline Office package, everything we need for our organization. At the beginning, you are simply providing your personal and billing information, which is required for a proper tenant creation. You need to add a payment method which is confirming your identity and will be charged after the trial month. You can remove payment methods from your tenant so that you can use only free services and you will not be charged automatically for something. Make sure that you have entered a valid telephone number and email address. This contact information is required for multi-factor authentication. Now we have successfully created a new Microsoft 365 tenant and can continue with tenant configuration. At the beginning of tenant configuration, you need to set up your organization domain. Make sure that you have access to your DNS provider of your public domain. If you don't have access to your DNS provider or you don't have a custom domain, you can add it anytime you want later by using the admin portal. I'm going to proceed with my custom domain on premto.cloud. Our both forests will be added as child domain as soon we have completed configuration. I will validate my domain by using txt record. TXT entries are nearly instant visible in DNS configuration, so you don't need to update DNS records or do some additional steps to speed up the verification process. I'm not going to create any users because we will sync them from our on-prem Active Directory by using Azure AD Sync. I'm going to change DNS servers for my custom domain to M365 DNS server, which you can find during the configuration wizard is still running. This configuration will speed up tenant configuration because all DNS entries will be created automatically for all M365 services. We have successfully configured our tenant and can start with configuration of ADFS service. Active Directory Federation service will provide us best sign-in experience between users and Resources Forest and M365 Cloud. Users will be able to authenticate to any application or service hosted in any of their three environments. Federated authentication is also called single sign-on. Our VM is now ready, and we can start with configuration of ADFS server and services. ADFS is a directory service, so we need to join our new server as a member of our domain. Our main identity forest is user.onpremto.cloud, so we are going to configure ADFS in that forest. Make sure that your ADFS servicer has a proper DNS resolution and can reach your user's forest domain controller. I am using PowerShell to join our ADFS server to user.onpremto.cloud forest domain. Domain join requires a reboot. After the reboot, we will continue with ADFS installation and configuration. Go to Server Manager. Add roles and features. Click Next and select Role and Feature Installation. Continue with Next button until you can select roles and features which you want to install. In the Roles and Feature selection, select Active Directory Federation Services and continue with Next and confirm the installation with Install. ADFS is running as a public service, so I recommend you create a public certificate and use this for configuration of ADFS. During role installation, I'm going to prepare a certificate so that we can configure ADFS service directly after role installation is completed. Open MMC console and add certificate snap-in to the main view. Extend your personal certificate hive and select Certificates. Right mouse click on Certificates, select All Tasks, select Advanced Operations and select Create Custom Request. Now you can set up your own certificate with any kind of parameters which you require for your service. Continue with Next and proceed without enrollment policy. Select Legacy Key in the template and CMC request format. This configuration allows you to use Microsoft cryptographic providers for key encryption. Now we can customize our custom certificate request. Open Properties and start configuration. Use a friendly certificate name so that you can identify it in any console. I recommend to add a service name for which this certificate is going to be installed. I'm going to use the name of our ADFS service, adfsuser.premto.cloud. Enter FQDN of your host as common name. This parameter will be the primary identifier of your service. You can also use a wildcard here if you have a star certificate. Depends on your certificate, you can add alternative name as additional attribute. It is recommended to add here any kind of host names or service names which you are going to cover with this certificate. Primary name is not required to be added to alternate name configuration. I did it here only for demonstration. Now we are going to configure private key security options. Select Private Key tab and extend Cryptographic Service Provider. Select Microsoft RSA Channel Cryptographic Provider. This is a most convenient key encryption for several Microsoft services. If you want to install this certificate on multiple services, don't forget to make the key exportable. Now you can close the certificate editor and continue with certificate creation by hitting Next button. Enter the name of your custom certificate request and select the location where it should be stored. We have created a custom certificate request. In a productive deployment scenario, you need to send this certificate request to a certificate authority public, or local, and CA will issue a signed certificate which you can then install on your service. In my demo, I am going to sign this certificate by myself without any additional effort. Refresh your certificate view in the MMC window. Look for Certificate Enrollment Requests and Open Certificates folder. Now you can see our custom certificate request. We can simply export this request as a certificate by using export function. You can export private key and install this certificate as a PFX file to any service. I recommend you to create a secure import password for productive systems. You can choose any password encryption logarithm which is supported by the service where you are going to install this certificate. Now select the name and path of certificate where it should be stored. Certificate is going to export it as a PFX file and can be imported on any services. Don't forget the secure certificate password. This is required for installation. Now we can continue with ADFS configuration. Return to Role and Feature Installation Wizard and click on Configure the Federation Service on this server. We are going to create first Federation server in a Federation server farm, so just click Next here. Select Domain Administrator account for this installation. Domain admin is required because Installation Wizard is changing domain configuration and schema configuration. I am going to use my user Forest Domain Administrator. Now we are going to set up the service name and certificate for our ADFS service. As mentioned before, the service name needs to be included in your certificate either. You will not be able to continue configuration. Federation Service Display Name is a user information which is written on welcome page of Federation Service. You can also customize this screen by using PowerShell. Click on Import and enter certificate password. If your certificate doesn't match with the service name, you will get an error. ADFS service is running with a group managed service account. This account has only permissions to run ADFS service, so make sure that this account has Logon as a service permission on a local machine. Microsoft is providing a very good guide how to create this service account and which steps are recommended and required. I am going to create everything during the installation. In a productive environment, you may need approval of Active Directory Service Owner and Security Department. I have no KDS root key configured. This is required for ADFS key rotation, so I am going to create it in the exact way how the wizard is telling me. If you have the same message during the installation, just enter the command in the PowerShell and continue the installation. Now the wizard is going to create Group Service Managed Account to run ADFS service on that machine. Just enter the name of new service account and hit Next. I am going to create a Windows internal database for ADFS services. For productive environment, I recommend to use SQL database for that service. ADFS is very sensitive service, and if it has an issue, all users may be affected, except cloud-only users. After we have configured all parameters for ADFS installation, you can view and copy the script for productive automation deployment if you need. During service installation, you may get some warnings. I recommend to document all installation issues so that you can troubleshoot them afterwards. I'm not going to troubleshoot anything because I am aware that this is a demo environment and no users are affected. After the configuration, you can close Role and Feature Installation Wizard and open ADFS Management Console. Be aware that a reboot is still required, so reboot the server before you are going to use it. After the reboot, we are going to configure Azure Active Directory Synchronization Service. Before we are starting with Azure AD Sync installation and configuration, I would like to summarize all steps which were done before. We have successfully deployed two Active Directory forests named user.onprem to .cloud and resources.onprem to .cloud. We have successfully created a two-way forest trust. We have successfully deployed Microsoft Exchange 2019 Server and Exchange organization into our resource forest. We have provisioned a bunch of users in our user forest and enabled linked mailboxes for every user in our resources forest. We have tested internal mail flow and assigned some mailbox permissions to a shared mailbox which is located in the resource forest. We have successfully created a M365 tenant and have configured our custom domain as primary user and resources domain. We have successfully deployed ADFS service and can start with hybrid configuration. We are going to connect our user and resources forest with our M365 tenant by installing Azure Active Directory Connector. I am going to install Azure AD Sync service in user forest directly on DC1. It is not recommended to install Azure AD Sync on a domain controller, so I will do it only for demo purpose. Azure AD Sync will synchronize users and resources from both forests to M365 tenant. After this step, we can create a connection between Exchange On-Prem and Exchange Online by running Hybrid Configuration Wizard. After successful Exchange hybrid configuration, we can start with mailbox migration. First, download Microsoft Azure Active Directory Connector. You can find the link in the description of this video. System requirements for AD Connect is also provided on the download page. After successful download, we can continue with the installation. Go to Download location of your Azure AD Connect installation file and start installation with a double click. After you have agreed terms of license and private notice, you can continue with installation. At the beginning, you can choose between custom or express installation. Once you have selected one of their options, you cannot change it after the installation. So I recommend to select custom, also if you are not going to change anything. Custom installation gives you an opportunity to configure following options. A custom installation location to use an existing SQL Server instance, to use an existing service account, specify custom sync groups and import synchronization settings. So I continue without any selection. Azure AD Connect is starting to install core components. For the user sign-in, I am going to use my ADFS service, so I select this option. Now you need to connect Azure AD Connect with your tenant. For this step, Microsoft recommends to use a cloud-only global administrator account. Installation Wizard is not storing any password. After successful login to Azure AD, you can continue with installation. Now you need to connect each of your Active Directories, which you are going to synchronize to Azure Active Directory. It is important that you have a service account for each forest and a conditional forwarder for each forest. Check before the installation if you have a connection to Global Catalog Domain Controller of each forest by using port 53, 389, and 443. And my user forest will be the main Azure AD Sync forest, so all Azure AD writeback function, like password writeback or device writeback, will work only for this forest. I am using my user forest credentials to add user forest and resource forest credentials to add resource forest for synchronization. After you have successfully added all your forests for synchronization, you need to verify your local domain UPN. All user domains need to have a rootable domain, so you cannot use any .local domains. Select the attribute which should be used for all users during the sign-in to M365. You can select here bulk of attributes. Most used attribute for user sign-in is user principal name. I am going to select UPN and continue with installation. If you want to change this option afterwards, you need to reinstall Azure AD Connect. Now you can select which OUs are going to be synchronized. I recommend to select only specific OUs for synchronization so that you have more control over this process. I'm going to continue without any filtering because it's a demo environment. Now we are coming to a very critical configuration part of Azure AD Connect. Here you need to configure how your users are going to be correlated with each other. If you have a multi-forest environment where every user has unique identity, select the first option. If you have a multi-forest environment where users have multiple identities, which should be correlated with each other, select the second option. Then select the attribute which should be the unique identifier. I am going to select Master Account SID. This is a best practice option for resource forest configuration. Now select the source anchor attribute, which will become identifier between on-prem AD user and cloud AD user. Standard source anchor is the immutable ID, which is generated from the hash value of the object GUID of your on-prem AD user. You can select additional filter rule based on security group, so you can control Azure AD synchronization simply by adding AD users as a member of this group. From my point of view, this is the simplest filter method for Azure AD synchronization. I am going to sync everything, so I will continue without any selection. Now you can add some optional synchronization features. As mentioned before, all writeback functions are working only for the primary forest. So if you want to use password writeback or device writeback, all users and devices need to be located in the primary Active Directory. I'm going to select password writeback and password hash. I recommend to configure password hash synchronization in a case that your ADFS service has some issue. You can simply switch to password-only authentication in a couple of minutes. We have finalized synchronization configuration and can continue to connect our ADFS service to our tenant. First, you need to enter domain administrator credentials. Second, you need to enter your ADFS farm server. Make sure that you can resolve your ADFS server in DNS and you are able to connect to it by using RPC protocol. Third, select the domain which is going to be federated by your ADFS server. This domain will be used during cloud sign-in process after you have entered your UPN. Fourth, accept Azure AD Trust. This configuration will create a federation trust between Azure AD ADFS and your local ADFS, so that federation services can validate identities across premises. After this step, Azure AD Connect installation is going to complete the installation and start with the first sync. At the end of installation, you can verify federation service connectivity. This step is just optional if you need to report that everything worked fine during the installation. In my case, I have got a warning because of missing IP6 configuration for internal communication. After the installation, I would like to validate if my users are got synced or not. I'm going to install MS Online module for PowerShell. This module is providing connectivity to M365 part of Microsoft Cloud. This module is mainly used for user administration and reporting. After you have loaded MS Online module, use Connect MSOL service command to connect to your tenant. After successful authentication, you are connected to your tenant and can manage M365 services. All our users and resources are synchronized now to Azure Active Directory, so we can continue with configuration of Exchange Hybrid. Before you are going to start with installation, you need to download Hybrid Configuration Wizard, HCW. You can simply download it from Microsoft website or start it directly in Exchange Management Console, ECP. Go to your Exchange Management Console and log in as Exchange Administrator. On the left side, navigate to Hybrid and click on it. On the right side, you can see a link to actual version of Hybrid Configuration Wizard. Click on that link and open the file. Start with installation by hitting Install button. Hybrid Configuration Wizard will start with configuration automatically after all installation binaries has been downloaded. Click on Next and start with configuration. At the beginning of installation, Hybrid Configuration Wizard is starting to detect your Exchange organization. Make sure that connection between all Exchange servers is not filtered or blocked. The wizard is detecting optimal Exchange server automatically, but you can also select anyone you like. Make sure that you have a public certificate on this server installed. You can see in this video that I have a private one, and installing a wildcard certificate during the HCW is running in the background. After you have picked the right Exchange server, log into your tenant by using Global Admin account. Make sure that your connection to Exchange on-premise and Exchange Online connection is not filtered or blocked. It is required that every Exchange mailbox server has a connection to Exchange Online and not only client access servers. So make sure that you can access Exchange Online by using port 443 from all your Exchange servers. I'm going to select a full hybrid deployment. So I'm going to use a hybrid modern authentication. For more information about HMA, you can find a link in the description of this video. After you have selected deployment method, you need to define EWS connection URL. You can configure it right here or by using Set Web Services Virtual Directory. Make sure that EWS URL is also not blocked by any kind of proxy services or SSL inspection. EWS services need to be accessed by Exchange Online from the internet, so make sure that your firewall is not blocking Exchange Online connections to your Exchange on-prem service. After successful EWS configuration, we are going to configure MRS endpoint, which is used for Exchange Online migration. Make sure that your MRS account's password is not expiring. For additional information about Exchange Online migration, watch my previous video on YouTube and read my Demystify Exchange Mailbox Migration article. You can change MRS account information anytime after the configuration. Our configuration is now finished, and HCW is starting the configuration of Exchange Hybrid. During the installation, Hybrid Configuration Wizard is creating an inbound and outbound connector to your on-prem environment. Send and receive connector to Exchange Online environment. It is creating a federation trust so that you are able to use modern authentication. You Exchange on-prem FQDN are also configured as service principal in your MSOL organization configuration. This step is very important for modern auth because all access tokens are protected with a certificate. You can also configure Edge server for mail flow, but in our case we don't have any Edge servers. After successful configuration, you can see calendar availability in Teams for all your on-prem mailboxes, and calendar function in Teams is also available now. In the next step, we are going to migrate all our mailboxes from Resources Forest to Exchange Online and test how our hybrid configuration is working. After successful configuration of Exchange Hybrid, we can continue with mailbox migration for all users and resource objects in our resource forest. I will not demonstrate how to use batch migration feature from Microsoft. I will demonstrate how you can migrate fast and efficient all your mailboxes to Exchange Online. I am using my own script for mailbox migration. This script is requiring a list of email addresses of all users who are going to be migrated and the name of migration batch. After you have entered the location of required file and batch name, the script is creating all move requests automatically. So if you have some error during creation because of Exchange Online throttling policy, just rerun the script. First, I am migrating all user mailboxes which we have deployed at the beginning, and then I am going to migrate all shared mailboxes and resources to the cloud. Important to know is that after the migration, all mailboxes which were migrated to Exchange Online will still persist in your on-prem Exchange organization as a mail user. After all move requests have been created, you can check the status by running get move request command or get move request statistics for more information. You can see that most move requests are completed nearly instant after running the script. It is not a fake. My mailboxes are simply very small, and internet connection on my Azure VM is very fast. If you are creating move requests and it takes longer than expected, don't worry. A mail migration can take a while. In the next video, I will remove the whole resource forest and explain every detail of resource forest decommissioning. Microsoft has no supported solution for removal of resource forest and does not recommend to do it. So I will share with you the impossible scenario of decommissioning an Exchange resource forest. Thank you very much for watching this video. Visit my blog and don't forget to like this video and subscribe my channel.